Live. My name's Dom. I'm the assistant pastor of Grace Church, and with me, as always, is John, our pastor, and Jonathan, one of our other leaders. And we're continuing our conversation on parenting. This is now the 5th week that we've been talking about this, and we're now onto the topic of praise and discipline, which is a bit of a hot topic. We're going to be careful with how we approach this, and we're not going to be able to cover absolutely everything. But as always, this is just coming alongside you and getting you to think through biblical principles and helping you to work them out in your family life. I should say as well, it has been noted the lack of a woman's touch in these conversations. And I'm sure that having that kind of perspective on a conversation like this would be very valuable, but I confess it's down to my lack of organisation, which has led to just a very manly discussion around this. But maybe that's good. Maybe the emphasis is too often on the female side. Who knows? This is just adding to a conversation, and we don't want to appear to be claiming that we're definitive in any shape or form. But thank you for joining us. If you're joining us live or whether you're watching this in the future, very welcome to you. So the area of praise and discipline. Should we even discipline children, I suppose, is the big question where our culture is at. Over to you, John, first.
Well, the Bible makes clear that children do need to be trained and disciplined and encouraged. So yes, there's an assumption that we're, from some, I think, that children are born either neutral or naturally good. I imagine that these people are childless, because when you have little children, you discover quite quickly that nobody's taught them how to club another child over the head with a dinky car, how to catch them with the corner as they bring it down. Nobody's taught them how to snatch or say mine and push somebody over. Nobody's taught them any of those sorts of things. You need to teach your child not to bite, not to hit, and not to snatch. And you teach them how to do that, or you consign them to a life of not being able to play well with others and not being invited back. So it's important for their sake that we do teach them. We teach them right from wrong, and particularly when they're young and their language skills aren't able to understand what you're saying, you have to show them, and you have to teach them in such a way that if they're biting that child, or if they're snatching things that belong to somebody else, that it becomes their problem when they do it, that they don't like the situation that behaving that way puts them in. And we can't be prescriptive in how you do that, and different children respond to different things. I've got I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of all my children, but one of my children just loves being the center of attention. She loves to do whatever will make people laugh, whatever will entertain her sisters. And so the only thing that really works with her is to go and sit on the steps for a minute or two. It just means that she's not the center of attention for that brief time, and it helps her calm down and behave appropriately afterwards. And we've used different methods with different children, but the important thing is that our discipline is not what is front and center in our children's experience of us, is it? It's in a context of genuine warmth and praise and encouragement, and so when bad behavior comes, you're able to swiftly and clearly point out that that's not acceptable, and make sure that you can that they can see that actually that hasn't paid off for them.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone would agree that children need to be taught, as we agreed in the first meeting that we had about how parenting does matter to everyone. But I suppose how, and the emphasis these days is on positivity and praise, and surely that could be enough to teach and even to correct, draw children into a positive way of living and behavior. Do we need both? Is praise going to be enough? And what should be the dynamic between the two? Jonathan, do you want to share a thought?
Yeah, I mean, let's start off in the controversial way. And the Bible doesn't say much at all about praising children. So I'm not quite sure it's necessarily the right word. The Bible does say that parents have to act in a very, very positive, affirming way towards their children. And I'm not saying we shouldn't praise in the way that we normally think of that word, but you're hard pushed to find texts in the Bible that talk about parents praising their children. Whereas there's massive amount on discipline. And also I think the problem is with our words as much as anything else. I mean, the word discipline is a very negative word in English. And I just looking up in the Greek and the Hebrew, the word doesn't have the same connotations at all in other languages, and not in the Greek. I mean, the word for discipline in the New Testament is the word that comes from a child, for a boy, and it can and is translated instruction and all sorts of different things as well. So the word instruction is quite a positive word, whereas discipline is a negative word. And discipline in the Bible covers all sorts of things. When we just speak to people, and when we train them, when we're preaching, that is part of church discipline. And even when we're talking in the church about they're under discipline, we are all under discipline. We're all under the training and instruction of the Lord, which is what parents are to do for their children. So it's providing channels, it's providing instruction, providing safeguards. Discipline begins there. It's a spectrum of meaning, and it doesn't always, or even mostly, I don't think, mean punishment. It shades into punishment, but that's only one aspect of it. So I think we have to be there. I mean, there's the verse I quoted a couple of weeks ago, which I still think is a very important word for fathers in 1 Thessalonians 2:11, where Paul says, "For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children." And then he gives those three words: encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of your profession. I think however you translate those words, in different ways you could translate them, but they're all very positive words: encouraging, comforting, urging. That's a parent's role. And that is all part of what's meant by discipline, really. It's training up a child. And I think we need to see it in a positive light. If we're doing something which is negative to a child, or that's perceived as negative, I think we're doing something wrong. Because everything we do, every part of discipline should be affirmative action and a positive thing for which the child will thank us. And, I mean, if you look at the most, I suppose, the passage that tells you most about God disciplines his children, it says in Hebrews 12. That's the heading I've got there. And the passage in Hebrews 12 where it says, have you forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. It's a mark of love. So it is utterly positive, whatever aspect of discipline it is. If we don't discipline our children, we don't love them. That's what the Bible says. And so therefore discipline in this broadest sense, and again, emphasize, I'm not talking about even punishment, and I'm certainly not talking about physical punishment. In its broadest sense, it's there to be encouraged. Endure hardship as discipline. God is teaching you as his children. If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, these are the words of scripture, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. And he says, moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more shall we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while, as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time. And it's not, again, talking just about punishment here. It's talking, we don't like constraints because we're rebels naturally. We don't like to be, channeled. We don't like to be told not to run into the traffic. And we know that with our own children. No discipline, in its broadest sense, seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. So that as Christian believers, we require the discipline of the Lord to live holy lives. And we are to be like our Father in heaven. And so if we love our children as much as God loves us, we must discipline in the broadest sense our children, provide them with structure. There's nothing more harmful than when you see parents, and sometimes Christian parents, who just imbibe the ethos of the times and virtually allow their children to do whatever they want. And that child-centered, we were talking about this before, weren't we? But child-centered families, they're just as bad as parent-centered families. What we need are God-centered families. And when our families are God-centered, then everything falls into place. Where God is missing in family life, everything is likely to go awry.
I'm reminded of that quote where it's saying the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy, isn't it? It's not caring.
It certainly is in this case, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that gives us license to hate our children, of course, but part of showing love to our children is, caring for them. Okay. Well, we're kind of hard pressed for time today, so it's going to be a shorter one. John, I want to give you another opportunity to say any more thoughts that you have while Jonathan's been speaking.
No, just that's very important, isn't it? That the word for discipline is the same as the word for training. We train our children how to behave. We train them how to brush their teeth and look after their physical needs. We train them who to listen to. We tell our children, listen to your teachers in school, and but don't listen to everything you hear on the playground. We teach them this sort of thing, don't we? And that is a loving act. There's a verse in Proverbs: "He who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is careful to discipline him." Now, I think that's speaking metaphorically. It's not insisting that on a literal rod, but actually there is training and instruction that is absolutely necessary if we are to be loving parents. And I think, when it comes to mothers and fathers, I think mums in general are more geared towards caring for our children and helping them in their physical needs. And in general, it's dads that are called upon to exercise the training side of things. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for a friend or an employee or your child is actually some kind of intervention where you have to say, for their own good and for the good of the whole family or the whole company or whatever it is, that the way they're behaving is not right. And here's how to behave better. And here's a better, a wiser way forward. And if we just only ever say affirming things, no matter how ill-informed or destructive someone's behavior or approach is, then that's not loving. That's just cowardice. There will be, you get some people who go through life only surrounding themselves with friends who agree with them. They'll never speak to friends that will challenge them in any way. And, those people are badly stunted. They lose out. And we cannot inflict that on our children. It's just really, really unkind. We have to, the Bible, God's the ultimate parent. We've said that in all the other weeks as well, haven't we? God encourages us with promises and blessings. He provides for us. He demonstrates his love for us very clearly. But nobody says anything as bad as Jesus says to us. You know, you might have somebody who tells you one day, if they're very angry with you, to go to hell, but they won't mean that. But Jesus says that actually our behavior deserves punishments, eternal punishments, and yet he demonstrates his love to us. That's what we deserve, and yet it is so self-sacrificial, and he pours out his grace to us. He invites us to be adopted into God's family. He's prepared a home for us, and so that constant love for our children, whether they deserve it or not, is what our model is to be. But telling them the truth, being honest with them, encouraging them, but pointing out where actually they can live better. And because if we don't do it, the people who love them most in the world, it's not going to go well for them when people that actually don't have those ties to them point out their faults. It's the most loving thing we can do.
And just picking up this theme again, that God is the ultimate and original and perfect parent. And we see the pattern set out in the Old Testament of how he was the father of the nation Israel. We see that when the nation was enslaved in Egypt, and he's called Israel his firstborn, and that was the message sent through Moses to Pharaoh. And then later on in the story, in a bit of a retrospective view, in Deuteronomy chapter 8, we see something of this parental role that the Lord had as they wandered in the wilderness to the promised land. And I'll read Deuteronomy chapter 8 from verse 1. Be careful to follow this speaking to Israel, be careful to follow every command I am giving you today, so that you may live and increase and may enter and possess the land that the Lord promised on oath to your forefathers. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the desert these 40 years to humble you and to test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Your clothes didn't wear out, and your feet didn't swell during these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. And I suppose that's just a helpful link in showing that we see the different dynamics in how the Lord humbled them and taught them, but it was, that discipline is also the umbrella to which the gracious provision and the constant faithfulness of God comes under, isn't it? The Lord walked every step of the way with them and gave them this bread of angels to them, and that's part of the discipline. It's teaching them and ultimately to trust them, and all affirmation, all discipline needs to be in the whole atmosphere of this loving and trusting relationship, isn't it? Because the way that the individual child feels is important, isn't it? We can get things technically right when parenting, but we also need to bear in mind, like you were saying before, John, the individual feelings and the makeup of them, and how will they respond. It needs to be appropriate on that level, isn't it? What is appropriate for one child may just be unfair for another. Yeah,
very true.
Well, we're going to have to tie things up. Thank you both for being with us. It's a short but sweet one, hopefully, today. But next week is going to be our final conversation to wrap up this mini series that we've been doing. And what we'd like to do is to fill in any gaps or to talk in more detail of things that we've already covered. So if you're watching this or watch this on a replay, then please let us know any questions that you'd like us to cover, and we'll deal with them next week. But thank you for joining us. Thank you, John and Jonathan. Enjoy the sun. Happy parenting, and God bless.
Bye.
Bye.